It does kind of seem sometimes that Terry Stern no longer wants to do what he does, right? And he can't leave his job, so he's like, maybe if the company burns down, I'll be okay. Like, he's kind of stuck in Patek prison, let's be honest, and there are worse prisons out there for sure. But he can't work anywhere else, right? He can't quit. He's just stuck. And I guess when people don't like what he does, he's like, what do I care? You guys gonna fire me? What are you gonna do about it? And he's right. No one can do anything about it, nor can he. Everyone is stuck in this weird existence of he's in that job for life, whether we or he likes it or not.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. If you've not been tuning in to our Tuesday morning live recording, then you've already missed all the chat about daylight savings, the watches that can do it, and why I should be allowed to rule the world in terms of whether daylight savings are kept or not. And the answer is, of course, they should be kept because they are very good and much fun and don't create any confusion whatsoever. Anyway, that's it. You can go back and check that on the Blog2Watch Weekly live channel. For the full preamble, do tune in about 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. I don't know. Are we now GMT again? Or we're back to GMT, aren't we? I don't understand. Or are we GMT +1 or -1? What? Kevin, help me. What actually are we at this time of year?
I think we're GMT, but I'm probably wrong.
Wherever we are, go
Wherever
check
we
out.
are,
It's
yeah.
that time. Whatever time it is in London or Glasgow, that's the time you need to tune the show. Right, well, we have 5 of us here this morning. Let's say good morning to everybody. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm very well, and I just asked perplexity.ai, and indeed the UK is on GMT time now.
Are you giving specifically Perplexity AI? Do you think if you asked a different AI, it'd give you a different answer?
I don't know of any other. I'm too old for that. I'm very happy that I know this one. That's all.
Ripley, your favorite AI?
I don't have one. It's hard to have a favorite. There's lots of ones that are my temporary least favorite. Today I asked Google's AI. I just couldn't remember the introduction date of a certain Cartier model, and I looked it up. And now Google's AI will give you the results right before the search results. And in that AI generated little giblet there are not one but two incorrect dates for this watch. I'm looking at both of those going, neither of those are right. They're off by like 30 years. So then I do a bit more digging, and yes, neither of those are right. I have no idea where they got them. So
what's the watch?
It was which type of tank was it? Not the American, some tank variant. But the dates it was giving me was the first tank, so like early 1900s, which obviously wasn't, it wasn't this one. And then the other date was shortly thereafter, I think, when it became originally commercially available a couple years later. So neither one. Yeah, neither one was what this was, which was a later iteration of the tank.
There are, I just realized, 12 different variations of the Cartier tank. There's the Normand, the Louis, the Centré, the Chinoise, the Obus, the Américain, the Française, the Solo, the Anglaise, the Mousse Solar Beat, and the Louis Cartier.
One for each month.
When's the Abrams tank coming out?
Some plates to share would be lovely.
This makes me want to promote a show that I've just recorded with two people who are regular on this, Will and yeah. We'll save it for later, but we do talk about tanks in the Cartier boutique, so that show will maybe make an appearance at some point in the near future. Kevin, your favorite AI?
It's probably going to be the Samsung or Google Gemini one. That seems to be the most accurate, but I don't ask it any complications or questions. It's just very, very simple because it's all being developed. Ripley, I'm surprised you got it within 30 years. I expect it to be next century, to be perfectly honest, the answers you get. So I just keep it very, very simple and don't ask it very taxing questions.
Well, Kevin, it only knows what the internet's history is, so things predating the internet, it gets a bit patchy on. So
yeah,
I think it was self-selecting to less than 100 years just because of the history of the internet itself.
Well, while Ariel's telling us about his favorite AI, Ripley or David, would you care to type into, or Kevin, into your favorite AI, the question: Did the JLC Reverso have its origins in the game of Polo? And let me see what AI actually says. Ariel, what's your favorite AI?
I'm going to be a nerd and say we shouldn't be using the word AI at all. These are large language models. We'll call them LLMs. AI is a highly imprecise term that, we're not going to go into. I haven't used enough of them to compare. I don't really know their strengths or weaknesses. It seems to be like the backer of the AI and their marketing power has a lot more to do with what people choose than what these large language models are capable of doing. I'd like to know what people who have used a bunch think about it. I know that the Chat GPT one is a relatively robust one. It seems to be that all the other, sort of large language models from the Googles and what's that are designed to promote their services and be very efficient, right? Because it's very expensive to run these queries, use a lot of electricity and processing power. So what I'm interested in the most expensive processing, I think the ones that you have to pay for are probably going to be better because they're simply doing more in the background. So that's my thoughts on it.
Oh, there we go. It all got very serious. Right.
Mhm.
Do we think that AI was involved in any way, shape, or form in the release design provision of the Patek Philippe Cubitus? We reviewed it prior to its release a couple of weeks ago, but since then, David has actually seen, worn, been on his travel. So, David, first of all, where were you? How come you saw this? How come you got to wear it? And what did you think?
Yeah, I was in Hong Kong for the Horology Forum 10 organized by Dubai Watch Week. Just a heads up that next year's Dubai Watch Week 2025 is going to be huge, twice the size as ever before, more guests, everything. So this year was just more of a relatively complex get together of industry professionals, journalists, brand representatives, a few things here and there. And it was cool. A lot of cool discussions. No new watch announced at all. Basically, well, there was one watch, but very we could focus on industry matters and discussions and stuff like that. So that was cool. And since I was in Hong Kong, I got the notification. Somebody send me over WhatsApp that, hey, if you go to this and that boutique, then you can go hands on with the Cubitus. And so I didn't rush, but I went over there, and would you not believe it? It was in the window actually. They only had one. They had the two tone in that particular boutique, and they pulled it from the window. It was wrapped in see-through plastic foil, all the entire watch, but you could still get a very good assessment of it. And I managed to chit chat a little bit with the rep in the AD at the AD, and talk a bit about it. And it was cool to see. It's as bad in person as it is in real life. I remember people said like, "Oh, wait till you see it." I'm like, we've seen so many freaking watches over the last number of years that I think we are in a position where we can make a relatively safe assessment when we see something like this. I was ready to be positively surprised, alas, I was not.
It's just a square Nautilus, right? I mean, that's all it
It's
is.
but it's bad too. I mean, you put it
Forget
on and it's
forget
just
taste and design. Let's just be honest. It's basically the Nautilus with some slightly different shapes. I mean, really, that's all it is, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Those of you that know me might know that I'm building a house at the moment, and one of the bits of the house has what we call over here wrinkly tin on it, which is tin with a sinusoidal wave. So it's a wavy tin. You'll kind of know the stuff. It's on farm buildings, etc.
Like corrugated.
Like corrugated tin, but it's got a sine wave, so it's a regular wavy pattern. And part of the process of deciding how we're going to clad this building, the manufacturer of the wrinkly tin also provided a sample of wrinkly tin that they put through two rollers. And what that does is it takes the top peak of the wrinkly bit and squashes it and makes it flat. And that's basically what this is. This is the Nautilus put through the wrinkly tin machine in order to take all the round edges and push them in and make them
There's
square.
basically a Dr. Seuss machine that creates these, right? You put in a Nautilus and the Cubitus comes out. I mean, we've all
That's why you
basically
can't buy a
figured this out.
Nautilus anymore. They had to discontinue it to turn them into Cubitus.
It
Basically.
requires. It takes you start with a Nautilus, and then a little bit of fairy dust, and you put it in the machine, and then boom, a Cubitus comes out.
Out it
Yeah.
comes. Out it comes. I mean, some of the marketing bump that's been produced on this, the stuff that talks about the fact that it appears to have hacking seconds, as if this was some completely unique, never. I mean, I think Patek have only done it once, maybe twice before in other watches, but it's just nonsense. It's just drivel,
It
and
really
the
is.
whole stern commentary about I don't care. what people say about this, they're never going to own a Patek. So, away you go and boil your heads.
And yet they do. Many commenters said that I actually own a Patek and I hate this and I hate the way that Mr.
Well,
Stern
I think
approached.
everyone's being a little bit presumptuous here. No, you never really own a Patek. You merely look after it for the next generation. So, I think Mr. Stern jumped a bit to conclusions. No one owns one of his brand's watches per his own brand slogan. So, yeah, I guess we're all in the realm of theoretical ownership at this point.
Oh, the condescension. It's a good thing these are water resistant. I mean, you have to go so deep down with this. It's nuts. Oh my god.
Oh, dearie. I was discussing with someone as to whether this was Stern's, in this country, Gerald Ratner moment, in saying that, for those of you who know who Gerald Ratner is, that this was like him effectively starting the decline of his brand, because the kind of tech bros, those that on the one hand, they're not new money, as we'd say in this country, are going to take completely against the attitude of, you will never. I don't care what you think of this, because you're never going to own one, because there are so many people now who start off not being able to own one, but then go and invent something and make a shed load of money, and then suddenly can, as opposed to old money who can own one, have the money to own one from being knee high to a grasshopper. So yeah, I think it was.
It does kind of seem sometimes that Terry Stern no longer wants to do what he does, right? And he can't leave his job, so he's like, maybe if the company burns down, I'll be okay. Like, he's kind of stuck in Patek prison, let's be honest, and there are worse prisons out there for sure. But he can't work anywhere else, right? He can't quit. He's just stuck. And I guess when people don't like what he does, he's like, what do I care? You guys going to fire me? What are you going to do about it? And he's right. No one can do anything about it, nor can he. Everyone is stuck in this weird existence of he's in that job for life, whether we or he likes it or not.
I did actually popped into my local Patek, Patek dealership, and they had all three. I had to say I'm presently surprised how it actually
Kevin
fits.
liked it.
Kevin
liked
David,
it.
I'm sorry.
Say it quietly. Say it quietly.
It's okay. It's shame in it.
You're in a safe space now, Kevin. It's okay. You can share here. It's okay.
Okay, I'm a safe space. However, he did say that the sales assistant I was speaking to said that this is going to be the more it's going to be the easier Patek to get. So they're definitely targeting, believe this or not.
That goes without saying.
Interesting.
So if you ever want a pretty Patek, you have to own an ugly one first. That's the idea?
That's probably it, yeah, definitely. But they're targeting newer clients with this particular
Interesting
model.
strategy.
When in your travels to the Patek boutiques, did anyone come up with a sexy way to say Cubitus?
No.
Oh no.
Rabovan.
I thought you were going to ask if they ask like, do you want one? you can buy this one.
No, I just want to know, like, have they found a way to make it sound good? Like, Aquanaut, yeah, Calatrava, sexy, but like, there's, I just want to know, like, who at Patek is going to find a good way to pronounce it where it's like, oh yeah, I want to own one of those, the Cubitus, the Cubitus, the Cubitois, there's going to be something that comes out of the woodwork here.
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be one of those Instagram Russian models. The one with the cars who do this is Rolls Royce.
Rolls Royce. That's what we need. We need someone with a Cubitus, or go in and do that whole, tap it with your nails, Cubitus, and then click on Cubitus.
There's so many beautiful watches out there that are jealous of all the time this not amazing watch is getting in terms of conversation. If only we chatted so much about pretty watches, right?
If this has been made by squishing a Nautilus, is it possible to undo the squishing? Like,
oh yes.
Could we take this to a jeweler and get him to stretch it back out again?
You just order a Nautilus bezel.
Yeah, you just polish the corners down and they'll get rounded a bit. And then you have it.
Good stuff. Well, this does lead us nicely on to David's article this week, which is why iconic watchmakers struggle to repeat their old successes. Now, this obviously does this. There's a health warning here, which is David wrote this before the Cubitus. Are you
Yes.
glad you wrote it before,
I'm
or
very glad.
would you have rather written it after you knew what had just happened?
No, I'm very glad I wrote it before, because the Cubitus just underlines, it's a, and highlights the fact that this has been the writing on the wall, for all these years. That's exactly, perfectly bang on what I was on about in the draft of this article. It's a struggle, I think. What do you guys think?
I mean, my thinking on all things, for example, JLC and Reverso, which we'll have a look at later from Ariel's review. But yeah, can we have something vaguely new? Can we have some? I mean, I'm not asking for Thierry and the Taft to come back and, you know, increase the bezel size of everything and make it look like an Invicta. And I suppose it's just as the Audemars Piguet 1159 goes past, maybe we need to reassess what AP actually did with that watch in trying to recreate something by actually going vastly different rather than what we've just seen Patek do with the Cubitus, which is, it's really just an iteration.
Yeah,
I have a lot of thoughts on the matter, and David and I have discussed this. It's true what he says, that it is challenging for old brands, legacy brands, historic brands, whatever you want to call it, to, in a modern sense, recreate an icon, a legend. And I think a lot of it has to do with misunderstanding about how these legends come to be in the first place. Very few of them are a result of a bunch of people sitting in a room and be like, let's make a really pretty watch that people desire. Like, that's just not how they would work. Oftentimes, a bunch of companies would be copying one another and then slowly refining the design over time, such that when you look at it 50 years later, it looks super refined, when the reality was this is just generations of competitors essentially copying one another. People weren't necessarily buying watches for design so much as they were for accuracy, for price, for quality, for reliability. And design was, in a lot of ways, historically second to those other factors. And so a lot of these watches were sort of birthed in a very different context. Whereas today they are trying to have a quick success where none of these watches were hits because of the design. If you look throughout history, the watches that were big hits, it was because they had a new feature. There was a price point. It was never just about fashion. That was never part of more traditional success for watches. That's much more of a modern phenomenon. So this idea that these companies, that it doesn't matter if they're new, they're old, but will come out with a design icon right away or something so pretty that we all agree that we want, doesn't make any sense, because their history is of making more practical objects that, yes, maybe had a nice design, but again, that wasn't the focus. So the context within which those watches were created back then doesn't exist anymore. And the context today is quite unforgiving and impatient, and does not recognize that it's not a perfect science. In fact, it's never a science. All brands can do, like clothing companies, is keep trying and trying and trying and see what people like. And maybe they'll want to buy this shirt for 10 years in a row. Maybe they'll want to buy it for 1 or 2 years and get bored of it. It's very difficult to tell. And so in that way, modern watch companies are a lot more like fashion companies than they are related to traditional timepiece makers.
Yeah, and you see this. I agree with everything Ariel said, but this isn't just the watch industry as well. Like, you look at the movie industry, and for big budget films, everything is a remake, a sequel, a prequel, or a spin-off in a parallel universe adjacent thing. And I think there's sort of, they want to be able to say that there's data behind this new concept and it's going to be a success. And so that confines them to things that have already been done so that they can have that data to prove it to success. But you look at anything that happened to be a success and was a big hit for anything, whether it was a movie, a clothing item, a watch, and a lot of that was a very new thing that did take a while to catch on, and people warmed up to it, or it kind of settled in, or it found its place, or it hung around long enough that it did become an icon, or it asserted itself within its category and informed other designs like the Submariner, or it was around long enough to, assert its place in other aspects of history like the Speedmaster. But none of this stuff was done overnight. None of, Omega didn't release the Speedmaster in 57 and be like, this is going to be our icon. They made a racing chronograph, and it utterly failed at being a racing chronograph and found a whole history in space that ultimately put it on the map and made it the watch it is today. But all of that takes time. And if you're trying to recapture lightning in a bottle by looking at the lightning that already exists in the bottle and say, let me get the same lightning again, you're making a million different Royal Oaks, or you're trying to recreate the design process of the Royal Oak and being like, okay, guys, we're going to do this in one night because that yielded success the first time. That's not the way to make a great design. Give them 12 hours and tell them to crank it out the next day for the press preview. So, it's not about recreating it. It's about recreating the innovation and the spirit and doing something that's going to be good, and then sticking by your guns long enough and refining it, like Ariel said, to the point where it does become lasting. But if you keep remaking the thing that already existed, it might be good, but it's not innovative. It's not new. It's not really exciting. It might be objectively good, but it's the Avengers 14 Infinity War 5 at that point.
I'm going to share this screen. So here is a watch review, Ariel, you did, Laurent Ferrier Grand Sport Tourbillon Pursuit. And my question is this: should big watch brands make more of the personalities within the companies who are actually doing the designs? So here is a Laurent Ferrier watch, presumably, designed by the person whose name is involved in the process. My question is, if this had Patek written on it or Rolex written on it, a big brand watch, would it be considered as nice? Should Rolex, AP, Patek be making more of the names of the people they have in the company, the personalities who are actually designing the watches? Because it seems that a lot of what is successful now that is a bit different to this Laurent Ferrier is because it has a name attached to it. You can be a fan of the watch and a fan of a designer, whether it be Roger Smith or FP Journe or whatever. That that the name gives sight of a personality behind it.
It's an important point you bring up, and the way that I'll respond is that any watch that has personality is going to do better than a watch without personality. But personalities, like people, need to be coherent. You can't just have a floating head and legs. You need to have a body and arms and all the other bits and pieces that go together. So some watches have no story and they're just letters and numbers. Some watches have bits and pieces of a story that marketing team has kind of cobbled together. And others are very cohesive, where everything makes sense and you can completely understand the intention behind it and the humanity behind it. Oftentimes that's easiest to do with the people in house of the company. You can farm that out to someone else or hire someone to do that, sure, but someone at the company is going to have that real story, is going to be able to understand all elements of it, and is going to be able to produce that in a way that ideally is communicated to enthusiasts. So I think the idea is that we buy watches because they remind us of something we value about ourselves and humanity in general. And the more you can imbue that through personality in the product, the more we're going to want it. Because this idea that you approach it as a commodity, which has happened a lot in the past, continues to happen today, is a very unsexy approach. So there is a population of people out there that want the commodity of, let's just say, a GMT Master 2 style watch. Not a GMT Master, but a GMT Master 2 style watch. Several brands make stuff like that. That's a commodity. And while there's a market for that, I think we all agree, not a very sexy kind of product. Whereas something completely different that has a lot more personality, we don't want to see as being a commodity. So I think anytime you commoditize a timepiece, us enthusiasts don't like it. And adding this personality is a real big way of creating it more a unique situation and thus not a commodity.
So should AP have launched the Code 1159 with knowledge of who had actually designed it, although I think they did, saying it was basically designed by committee, that would that have made it easier to swallow?
I mean, Roger Smith is Roger Smith, so of course you promote Roger Smith, but like, what would they do? The Francois-O-Matic for the Code 1159, the Benny Hamias, master, like, and Rolex is bigger than anyone. There's not going to be the Dufour master the Stern and Cuba Stern, like, there's not. These things are bigger than these people, and they're going to be around after these people. So I think being part of the big brand sort of puts you at a disadvantage as far as promoting the personalities, because Tag Heuer is owned by the Arnauds, they're not going to promote the Arnauds. They're going to promote the Monaco, the Carrera, these things that have these long-standing histories, not the current designer who might only have a tenure of 5 years there before he goes off and starts his own brand or something. And then that's where the person gets promoted. You know, Breitling wasn't promoting Sylvan, but now Sylvan has his own brand and it's his own name on the dial.
I was going to bring out specifically Sylvan and Breitling because I think there was an aspect there with the enthusiasts, Sylvan coming on this show as creative director of Breitling really helped. Okay, it was only amongst maybe the listeners to podcasts about watches to give more personality to some of these releases because people began to understand who Sylvan was, his interests further afield than just watches and his own stuff. And I actually think that made me like Breitling more because I understood some of the guy behind the scenes who was actually involved in this. And I just think that brands hide their design teams, big brands hide their design teams too much. They're too protective of them. They don't let them loose. David?
Yeah, I think there are two reasons for that. One is that people leave. So if you build your brand around somebody who then leaves, just like Sylvan did, what happens is that the brand loses face a little bit. Brands want people to buy the brand. This is point number two, is that what you see a lot of the time is that even in their official communication, the brands usually say that, you know, something has just happened to their watch, or it was made, or it was finished in some way, or designed by whatever, you know. So everything these watches just come to be in a way, and the human effort is only, you know, resorted to like finishing maybe every once in a while, but not even that now that it's, you know, largely automated for up to like $20,000 or $30,000 price points, or possibly even higher now. So I think brands put tremendous amounts of money into building the image of a brand, and people can resonate more with a brand because then they can assign different personalities to it, especially themselves. Once you see a face, a sound, a tonality, an accent, or whatever, then you're like, oh well, maybe this brand is not for me because I don't like that guy or that girl or whatever. So that's why brands are more universal in their appeal in a way.
So let's compare and contrast quickly. Ariel, you reviewed the Laurent Ferrier Grand Sport Tourbillon Pursuit. I love this watch. This watch looks right up my street. A hidden tourbillon, ultimate flex. Not showing it on the front, but what did you actually think of it? You got to try it on. I've never had the privilege or the pleasure.
I wore this for a while. When I first saw this watch a number of years ago, when it first came out, I have to admit I was kind of like, okay, another Me Too integrated, you know, bracelet watch. It was steel originally, then gold came out. This particular version was titanium. But when I wore it, I kind of quickly saw a lot of the virtues. One thing that I think is really important is the watch is absolutely soft to the touch. Every edge, for the most part, is polished in a way that's not sharp. And that makes a big deal because if you've ever worn a sharp watch, you're like, you know, it's such a shame that it's painful to wear or run your finger along. And when you have something which is really soft, wow, it makes a huge difference. So there's a very specific intentionality behind the polishing. Also, the polishing is very lush. I think it's very hand done. The brushing is deep. You can see this texture. The polishing is really nice. This was a watch that, you know, had been worn by other people, but I have to say it didn't look like it. They did such a good job with the titanium that it seemed to deflect a lot of the wear that you would assume would happen on this. And this is, as far as I know, not a treated titanium. So I have to say I was quite impressed with the comfort. It's got a hip style. It kind of looks interesting. It's kind of swinging 70s. It's not for everyone, but it is cool. It is definitely cool. It's legible. You know, I would have liked for it to be a micro rotor automatic tourbillon, or at least have a power reserve. But you know what? That's a minor quip. It's a beautiful movement. It's quite accurate and reliable. There's not really a lot of other watches out there like it. So it kind of it may not be something that you immediately lust after visually, but it's sort of like after you go on a few dates, you're like, oh wow, I'm having a good time.
And
it grows on you.
And compare and contrast that watch on the basis of the last conversation to this other that you were involved in reviewing. This is the JLC Reverso Tribute Moon. Moonface monoface watch in near original size.
I love how
Is that
watches have to like say one face. Like, is that? I mean, I understand duo face, but to have the one face is what it's like. Roger Dubuis with mono balancier. I mean, come on.
give us your two Balanciers. So how does what can you compare and contrast how a watch like the JLC Classic, lots of history, all the rest of it made you feel, versus also a classic, but more of I say modern day classic in Laurent Ferrier? Did you feel any difference between the two because of the personality, or personality on the one hand with Laurent Ferrier and big corporate on the other hand with JLC? Is it just impossible to compare one? Is it complete apples and oranges?
I mean, these are completely unrelated watches. Price point, they're vastly different. This is expensive for what it is, but still, $8,900 versus, much more.
175,000.
Yeah. I like this watch. It's a bit smaller than I think I would personally choose, but it's elegant. It's comfortable. The proportions work really, really well. If you were someone that wore sleeves a lot, had a little bit more of an elegant attire, kind of like those, perfectly sized cuffs for your wrist. Like this is nice. It's a bit boring if you don't have something special in the case back. It has this blank steel case back that honestly is designed for engravings or paintings. If that's what you end up doing, that great. Otherwise, I don't think you'll ever be flipping it around. I guess that's the point. Like if there isn't something special there, forget the fact it's reverso, because you're not going to be reversing it very often unless you're just fiddling with it, because there's just no reason to have the blank side on. But it's pretty well done. Again, it's hard to stomach the price, but I guess this is the new normal, right? So 8,900 it's actually not the starting price point. They still have some like older women's models. One's an automatic, which is like a little bit less, but you could tell they haven't quite upped the price there yet. So this is, I guess you could say, the entry level men's version.
David, Ripley, Kevin, thoughts? Compare and contrast me two watches at entirely different price points and how they might make you feel. I'm all about the feelings this morning. All about the how's it make you feel?
We're all new men. That's what it is.
Share,
we're all new men.
Share your feelings. Open up to me. It's a safe space.
I like the concept of the Reverso. I don't have any horses. I am wearing a polo hat though from Hublot, so
Woohoo.
There is that. But it's not so much the concept, but I like that I think it's a very elegant watch. I think for some dress watches, unless they're just expertly done and just absolutely breathtakingly finished, they can sometimes be a little bit boring. And I don't mean that as far as it's a boring watch, but like it's not necessarily the thing you want on your wrist every day. You want a bezel to spin, you want some guilloche to admire, and I think having a case that you can flip around like a fidget spinner is great. It gives you the opportunity to engrave something on the back, a doodle, literally anything you want. You could just write happy hour. It's 4:00 somewhere, like whatever you want on it.
Live, laugh, love.
Yeah, there
Not
you
that.
go. You could draw your own power reserve indicator. It's fun. And I kind of like the ability to just kind of flip it around, and it's at this point it just looks like an $8,000 medical bracelet. It's it does absolutely nothing at that point, but I do like that they still make it. I like these dials a lot. I think this goes back to the original Reverso dial versus the style like Ariel had mentioned that the collection sort of migrated to before going back to it. I think this is quite nice and elegant. Again, I liked these single face Reversos when they were like $5,000 or $6,000. 8,000's getting a bit high, but among the rectangular watches, if you feel like a Cartier tank is just like too obvious of a choice, I think a Reverso is an excellent alternative that's always going to get the nod from someone.
I think I'm getting the Ghostbusters logo, but instead of a ghost, I'm putting a horse rider with a polo mallet on the back of the Reverso with a no polo thing. So if anyone would like to donate a Reverso to me so that I can abuse it in that way, you should absolutely feel free. Kevin, David, final thoughts from you? Oh, Ripley?
Well, I was going to say, Rick, do you have a horse?
I do.
I'm sure you got several.
I've got There's 7 standing here, about 12 feet that way.
Someone with a Reverso, send it to Rick. He will ride one of the horses that will reinstate the Reverso's polo heritage for 2024, forging it
That's
for
right.
the next 100 years, and then
We
Me and
trust you,
Hartman-
Rick.
That's actually it took it. That's right. It took JLC 120 years to justify the polo-ness of their watch, and that was because of me riding it with one in a polo mallet.
Scottish farmer.
That's as close as it's ever been to a polo match. Is me. Yeah, that would be quite depressing for a number of reasons.
In response to your question, I did have a quick chat or check on Google, and it does say it was designed to withstand the rigors of polo matches after a British Army officer's watch crystal was smashed during a match. So
Yeah.
if Google says it, it's got to be right.
And Sylvester Stallone created Panerai one day while eating a corn dog in Vienna or something. I believe that's how that legend goes.
Great stuff. Right. Well, yeah, we can get into that. David, one of your grinding gears next should be like the myths, the best myths that watch brands have. So Polo, Sylvester Stallone, yeah, watch brand myths and debunking them. I'm sure
Oh my
there's
goodness.
quite a few about.
You can just go
Right.
to Periscope for that. It's endless entertainment there.
Okay, let's look at playing Hit Miss maybe, and let's let Azad into the room and say good morning to him. Good morning, Azad. You are live on a Blog to Watch Weekly Live. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's do what we normally do, but we sometimes forget to do, which is go around the room, find out who everybody is, where they are, and what they are wearing. David. Oh, we also didn't ask you, David, as to what films you saw while you were on flight to Hong Kong. So you should give us a quick blog to watch watches while flying.
Yeah,
Tell us where you are now.
Ask somebody else. Let me look up the title in the meantime.
I've
Hold
got
on,
one.
Let me pull that up.
So on my flight back from Prague, I watched Blue Beetle. I think it's something in the Marvel or Marvel adjacent or DC universe, something comic related. Anyway, not the protagonist, but the lead woman in its father owns this tech company or something, or her family does, and it appears to be a vintage Casio like data bank, which is like the key to the underground lab in it. So prominently featured.
Excellent. Good stuff. And Ripley, where are you and what are you wearing both on your person and on your wrist?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Rick.
Fashion check.
I am wearing the Ace Jewelers collab with Icapod, and on the shirt, and obviously Hublot on the hat, but on the shirt we have another Blog to Watch shirt. This is the blue embroidered Royal Oak bezel version. So Genta's original integrated bracelet sports watch, certainly not the Nautilus, certainly not the Cubitus, and feels quite nice, and it matches the hat.
Excellent, excellent. David, you found your information, but where are you? What are you wearing?
Yes, I pulled the watch. I have it in for review. It's the Super Ocean Heritage still. It's pretty cool. In two-tone. It's my least favorite Breitling collection on my least favorite strap on the Milanese, so I thought I will give it a try. Quite an interesting experience.
Is it still your least favorite on your least favorite, or has it advanced up the list?
It's pretty good actually. I don't mind it. It's not the one I would get, but it's still pretty cool. And the movie I watched was The Moon Thieves, and it was about some kids or guys or whatever. It was sort of like an Ocean's 11 sort of theft movie or whatever, or robbery or whatever. And they wanted to like obtain one of these super rare moon watches or something like that, but once they get there, of course they are all fake. Like all the watches in the movie, like they open this safe with great fanfare and it's like super secret, and they try and break in, and you see the watches on the winders and everything, and it's a cool movie, and it's like it's fun in the way that it is done with all the cliches, of course. And you see this rainbow Daytona that is obviously fake, and you see the moon watch that is obviously a terrible fake. And I was not paying too much attention, so I'm not sure if this is intentional or not. But you are looking at a bunch of fake watches being probably stolen or something like that. If you want to have some fun there's this like, they are like, oh, it was the first watch ever worn on the moon, and it's obviously about the moon watch. And they actually ended up photoshopping the moon watch on an astronaut's like spacesuit, but it's upside down. It's such a blatant, so stupid mistake. It's just, if you're a watch nerd, it's fun to watch The Moon Thieves as a movie because you can pick all kinds of holes in it, and it's otherwise just a charming, fun movie.
Good stuff. The Moon Thieves, a recommendation to watch from David. Kevin,
That's
where
right.
are you? What are you wearing?
I suppose that's a good way for getting younger generation into watches. Telling them the best way to get watches is to steal them. But never mind. Yes, I'm in Kent. It's a bit gloomy, and I'm wearing Oris New York Harbor limited edition.
Very nice. Very nice. We'll come on to Oris shortly and hit miss maybe. Ariel, where are you? What are you wearing?
Every time I see that New York Harbor watch, I think about what the New York Harbor smells like. Which is
They
not
dip it in before boxing it.
I'm wearing for Halloween time. This is the orange Notice Canyon. This is the one they did with Matt Farah. So I have a lot of orange watches, but I found this one to be fun for the Halloween season. I'm also wearing one of the aBlogtoWatch shirts. This is the Submariner dial, the Loom shirt, which is always fun. It's really cool. You've been outside and then you walk into a dark room and your shirt's glowing.
I think the only way to deal with this is, Ariel, is it feasible for you to switch the lights off where you are just now?
No, sir, it is not.
Oh, it's not. We want to see it loom in action. Come on. So next week you need to be able to switch the lights off.
The aBlogtoWatch shirts glow brighter than at least 80% of the Timexes I've reviewed in the last 2 years.
I would say all watches that I've ever had, for real. If you charge them at like 8 p.m., it still glows at like 5 in the morning. I don't know how we did it, but it's a thing.
We need a photograph every hour through the night, Ariel, of you sitting up in your bed to see just how luminous it is. Selfie shots. Azad, where are you? What are you wearing?
I'm in London, and I've got the first Omega in space on today. Tuesday.
Excellent. Good stuff. I'm in Scotland and really Glasgow to wear a panoramic, but you knew that already. Okay, first up is going to be this. Ariel, you reviewed it. This was one of the first watches I owned in this range, and I wore it for years before I got into mechanical watches. So this is an iteration. The Tissot T-Touch Connect Sport Hybrid Smartwatch with improved software. Ariel, give us a short history of the Tissot T-Touch. I love this watch. Not necessarily this version of it, but I love this watch.
Yeah, I think that's really important to say off the bat, that the T-Touch of old has really nothing to do functionally with this watch. There's, of course, design similarities. This is a entirely different type of watch. This is essentially a light smartwatch. This is meant to be a combination of a traditional looking Swiss watch with Swiss made stuff and Bluetooth connectivity and some activity tracking and stuff like that. It does have a photovoltaic cell dial, which is also made in Switzerland, which is quite efficient and something that they're very proud of. Again, I want to emphasize that it's really a hybrid, because even though it is smartwatch and you can charge it and stuff like that, and it has notifications, it doesn't have sort of the range of features an Apple Watch or a Garmin or something like that would have. It's very pretty looking. The materials are nice. This is, again, it's for the type of person who's sort of like on the fence and likes traditional watches, is like smartwatch curious. And there are a lot of people out there. For someone like me who has had a lot of exposure with very high functionality smartwatches, I have issues with some of the limitations of the software and stuff like that. This is the second time we've looked at this watch, because since Tissot came out with it, they've improved the software a lot, quite significantly. And I had this long article on the first one, which was like, here's all the software Tissot needs to add to it. And Tissot's like, oh, we added a bunch of it. Some of it is, again, still a little bit early. For example, there's something called the solar intensity function. And remember, this is a solar powered watch. So I said, wouldn't it be great if A, it told you like how much power it was generating, and B, there was a warning indicator, because, our skin isn't meant to be outside for too long. It just kind of be interesting. It's like, you've been outside, but now's enough. You should go inside. You may be overexposed, something like that. all it does is give you a current kind of graphical indicator of how strong the sun is. It's not really precise. You don't know what you're looking at. No history over time. So they're adding stuff to it. But I think what's most impressive is the hardware is really nice, and it is sort of a work in progress. And this is not by any means the first time that the Swatch Group, which owns Tissot, has gone in the smart space. And I like that they won't give up. They're never the first. They always do it a little bit differently, but I love them for keep trying.
Yeah. Now I understand why they didn't send it to me to test, because solar intensity function would simply, it would just have registered it being night across here. That would have been it.
Just a quick question. Oh, you say it's got updated software. Does it automatically update like a phone, or do you have to buy a watch to get the latest functions? You have to
No,
continuously buy every...
it updates.
Okay.
I mean, you have to download the software, but it updates.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Good stuff. Right. Well, let's decide: is it hit, a miss, or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Miss, maybe, miss, maybes, misses and maybes. I would love for this to be a hit, but it just has none of the charm of the original touchscreen Tissot T-Touch. With the, was it an aluminium bezel, steel bezel? I can't remember which it was, but it was just a great, great watch. Lasted for ages, and this is too big. The other, well, yeah, that's me. Panorama saying this is too big for what it does. So it was a miss from me. David, how'd you vote?
I voted a maybe. I think if you want this sort of functionality, it's difficult to get it elsewhere. I'm not a fan of the execution or the design. I can't really resonate with this look. I wouldn't want to see this watch on my wrist, to be honest, just because of the design. But if you like it, it's you can go with it. It fulfills its function, and as Ariel said, I also respect Swatch Group for sticking with it and just continuing this this art collection.
Yeah, Ripley.
I really want to like it. I like that Tissot even does this in the first place, and that Swatch Corp does this. But I said it's a miss. How much is this piece, by the way?
Ooh, there's a question.
About a little bit over $1,000.
Yeah, that's
So
kind of...
at a little bit over $1,000 for 1 foot in, 1 foot out quasi smartwatch Tissot, I'd rather go get like an Apple Watch SE or a Garmin Vivo Active 5 for like $250, and then get a mechanical PRX for like literally the same price. Then you get a nice mechanical Tissot, you get a smartwatch that'll do far more, and you can not feel like you've compromised on both fronts. So I feel like it's a little bit expensive for what it is. If this was a really entry-level model for Tissot, and it was like a few $100s in the same way that, you know, the least expensive Hublot are their connected watches, I could kind of say, okay, well, this is sort of for like the watch curious who might be wanting something a little bit more elegant than their Apple Watch, or their, you know, or that maybe they had a basic like Timex and they want to kind of get their foot into nicer watches or Swiss watches. But this price point, I have a hard time assigning it any type of value proposition, whether it's from a functional perspective or a horological one. I kind of feel like that same price could get you two watches that both succeed at, you know, what this aims to do.
Well, Joseph in the chat, who's wearing an Urban Jurgensen, is saying that this is a miss. Kevin, what did you think?
Hold on, I gave this a maybe. It's not really my style. I can understand why Swatch have done it, and to be perfectly honest, I think more brands need to go down this route. But I do agree with Ripley. You can buy, a cheaper Tissot and have something which has more function on the other wrist pieces. That's what I do. I always wear a little tracker, it's cost me £30, which does way more than anything else. And then you have your watch of choice on your main wrist. So it's a maybe. There are people who will buy it, but it's just not for me.
Ariel, what do you reckon?
I like a lot of this, and I see potential in it. I want them to make a much more robust product that has more of those fun complications and things like that, like we loved from the original T-Touch. So they sort of call it T-Touch, but it's sort of only loosely related to that world. So my heart is sort of still there on that type of gadgety style watch. This is a complicated watch, and one of the biggest issues has to do with power consumption. So again, it's something that I'd happily wear around. The problem is there's a lot of other watches that I'd rather wear, because I'm not a one watch person. This is a watch for someone that probably wears a smaller amount of watches than me. So if I want a smartwatch experience, I'll go all the way in that direction. If I want a traditional watch experience, I have watches for that. So that's why it's sort of a maybe for me. But someone who is more like a regular person and has less watches, this is going to make more sense.
Ariel, quick question. It's called the T-Touch, but is the screen actually a touch screen?
Barely.
You can touch it.
Can't touch this. It was so funky, the original. But you couldn't fix them once they broke. Azad, what do you reckon?
I think the T-Touch had its time, when it first came out. Smartwatches have moved such a long way that it has become pretty much redundant. And when you think what's out there already, there's a number of Casio models that will do something similar to this. Maybe not quite as advanced, but certainly for half the price or even less. And I agree with Kevin. I mean, I do a fitness tracker, and that serves me for everything I need, and then I can wear something nicer on the other wrist as well. So it's a miss for me.
Well, let's move on to something which is entirely different, and I expect we'll at least get the heart racing of one of our team today, and that is the Zenith Defy Skyline Skeleton Bindi Limited Edition watch with all the jewels. Ripley, tell us a little bit about this. You did the review.
Yeah, so Ariel and I went to their event. It was just here in LA to check it out. This is, from a functional standpoint, it's the same thing as this standard Zenith Defy Skyline skeleton. So it's in stainless steel, and it's got that high frequency movement that's based on the architecture of the El Primero. So it's 5 hertz. You've got that rapid seconds hand. So that small seconds hand moves around, makes one rotation every 10 seconds rather than once a minute. So it's kind of got a cool movement. You can see the balance frantically moving in there in its silicon bits. This is actually Bindi's first collaboration watch, which I was really surprised to hear. They're kind of a staple in the Southern California watch scene. Obviously, they do a lot of jewelry, so having a piece that is both watch and jewelry makes a lot of sense for them. But you've got an assortment of different colored sapphires in the bezel, those same ones mirrored on the dial, marking on the case back. And unlike the standard models, you get the stainless steel bracelet and a black rubber strap. And then it uses the same type of bracelet for the other Defy Skyline models. So if you wanted one of the colored rubber straps to complement some of the hues on the bezel, those are all available and compatible as well. And naturally, it's a limited edition, and I believe it's $36,200.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So, but is it a hit? Is it a miss? Or is it a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Hit. Miss from Kevin. Oh dear. A hit. So hits all round except Kevin. Yeah, me and David think it's a hit. I suspect we both think it's a hit for exactly the same reason. David, go ahead.
I mean, it's cool. It's not hideously overpriced. And somehow, strangely, this collection and this model just works with these gems on it better than without it. So I quite like it for that reason.
Yeah, 36,000 for a full gem set type watch almost feels like a bargain.
Almost. And yet it
feels
doesn't.
like a bargain. That's just cool. I mean, how could you not think that this was great? I guess we'll find out in a minute from Kevin. Ripley, you gave it a hit.
Yeah, I gave it a hit. I think from a concept, it's not like a revolutionary new model compared to what you can find in Zenith's catalog, but I do feel from a conceptual standpoint, it does kind of accurately represent sort of like a Bindi version of a Zenith. Obviously, this aesthetic is inseparable from the Rolex Daytona, so I think it was a smart move to, 1, not make this a chronograph, and 2, give it kind of a skeletonized dial, so it feels like a tangibly different piece. And for me, unless you're like a billionaire, you like the rainbow gem set watch, but you're not necessarily spending $250,000, $500,000 on one to have as this kind of fun horological novelty. $36,000 is obviously very expensive still. This comes at a steep premium compared to the standard stainless steel models that are unadorned with gemstones. But at the same time, it's not so expensive that you're buying this piece. No one's going to buy this and wear it every single day, 365. So I feel like it's a more appropriate.
About that. Me and David might.
Oh yeah.
I feel like
One
David
watch
might want some
collection.
additional diamonds or something at some point. He wants more icy, more of a snow cone. But I feel like this is a more appropriate amount to spend, where it's very nice, comes from a well-known luxury manufacturer, very well executed gems, but if you don't wear it every single day, it's not like you just have $250,000 sitting in the watch
Mm.
box at all times.
Do you think the value, or not so much the value, the pricing, how much of the pricing is to do with the time it takes to do the gem setting versus how expensive the gems actually are? Are the gems actually not that expensive, but it just takes time and effort and premium to put it in? Do we know? Anyone know how
Yeah,
much this kind of gear
the
costs?
setting is a pain. It's really quite easy to get it wrong. Once you put the last one in, you can't change anything. So it's we have one go at it. Selecting the gems is also quite difficult. You have to have like a reference stone, and then you pour a bunch of them on the table, and you set like one stone that is a reference, and then you compare the others, and you try and define, like you try and find ones that match. In the real world, if you go out and you hunt for these watches and you look at them, what you will find is that a lot of them have a break in the pattern somewhere where it just doesn't add up. It's almost the perfect pattern, but once you close the circle, then there is an issue at some point. This one looks like a great example here. But they usually are the ones that you see for press and media and whatever. So if they can get all of them this right, then that's great. The quality of the setting also looks great. I would not be surprised if this was Sala Nitro or somebody like a really high end supplier. Obviously, it's not Zenith doing this. It's a supplier somewhere in Switzerland.
Yeah. Kevin, you gave it a miss. Justify yourself,
Oh
young man.
well, what can I say? I like the skeletonization of it. The Zenith bracelet looks amazing, and the size looks fantastic. But it's just the gem setting. I just can't get on with that gem setting. I don't know what it is. Are they synthetic or are they real? What is it, rubies? Or...
Well, I mean, they're all
I think
real,
it's a
whether or
mix,
not,
probably.
yeah, whether, I mean, they're all real gemstones. Nothing's, a false synthetic, stone. That at the same time, though, with a lot of these colored sapphires, you're not going to find these in nature. So they're, chemically treated to make them their colors in that degree. But as David mentioned, yes, the setting itself is hard, but it's not so much the stones on this. It is getting that gradient. It's not like if it takes 50 stones, it's not like you have 50 stones in front of you and you just put them in a bezel. It really is kind of like doing a puzzle, but it's not like all the pieces go there. You kind of have to hunt for the stones. Some stones you can't use because it might be too dark of a hue, and the ones adjacent to it would then need to be correspondingly darker, which would mean all of the stones would need to be darker, and it's just a bit too dark that you can use. So you have that one left out and try to use it in another. So it's getting it organized to the point where you can set it is a lot of the struggle, and you need far more stones than what actually ends up inside the watches. Sure. Because you have to be selective about which
Absolutely,
ones go where.
I do understand that, but I mean, I love the design. It's just if it didn't have the gem set bezel, it's definitely a hit. I'm a big fan of it. But
Kevin, they make that already, and you'll save yourself like $13,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, now that's a bargain compared to 36,000.
You agree with Joseph in the chat who doesn't like this. Remember, you can watch this show live broadcast on a Tuesday morning UK time, a Blog to Watch Weekly Live, and take part in Hitmas. Maybe yourself. Ariel, you give it a hit. Is that an everyday wearer for you?
Look, when I see this watch, I think of the members of the Bindi family who like jewelry. That's sort of their background. They got into watches as sort of a second part of their business life, and they like it a lot. So for me, I just think about that family, their personality, the stores, and of course, their customers. So I really get what they were going for. The rainbow bezel is well done. I've seen far worse rainbow bezels in much more expensive watches. The size of the watch makes sense. There are a lot of pluses on this. Do I want to look at a skeleton dial every day? No. Do I want to wear a watch and a bracelet every day? No. So it's definitely not a daily wear, but I could see myself picking this up probably more often than I would think.
Good stuff. And Azad?
It's a hit for me. I'm a real fan of the base model, and I think the rainbow setting is tastefully done, nicely done. I don't think that the price is too different to what's out there already. Actually, probably even lower than what you get elsewhere. So I really like it. Hit for me.
Good stuff. And finally this week, we're going to have a look at this and the Oris Divers Date watches. And I guess my more overriding question is, what has happened to Oris? Because it feels like they've gone from being the darling of the geek watch industry to like just being also Rands. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's a wider problem. But this is the new range of Oris divers, which yeah, they just look like the way they look. There's not really a lot to say about them. There's nothing too standoutish for me. So let's see if that's reflected in how you guys vote. Is this new range from Oris or this refresh a hit, a miss, or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Miss, maybes, hit, maybes. David, talk to us about Oris and this watch in particular.
That's probably the toughest question this morning. If you like this sort of watch, or if you like Oris or whatever, clearly they have put effort into an update, which I can respect. That is cool. It's quite slim. It's boring and unique at the same time, which is also quite rare in a way. The proportions are very much its own thing. I like the bracelet with the thin veneer on the side. So it has quirky little elements here and there that to me conveys effort, and I respect that. I'm not a fan of the watch itself, but that's more of a tasting.
Ripley, thoughts on Oris on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very exciting release, but what they did with the Divers 65, which I guess is now just the Divers, is kind of what they did with the Aquas earlier this year. It's a generational update. It's an all-around, more refined, updated, improved watch, but it's not reinventing the wheel. So when you look at the new Aquases, it kind of looks just like the old Aquas at a first glance. You see them side by side. You see they've done a lot, and it's not very obvious, but it's a lot that translates to a more refined experience, whether that's thinner links, better taper, better geometry, thinner case, and all of that. So, you know, this is very much that. I wouldn't be selling my Diver 65 to pick up one of these. Certainly, it's very, very similar, but the Diver 65 had been around for a while. They've made it in honestly an uncountable number of iterations and sizes and materials by this point. So this is very much a generational update. It's not exciting. You can get similar-ish watches from brands like Nevada, Volcane, any of those kind of retro skin diver styles. But, you know, this one does a few things that are unique. It is more expensive than the outgoing generation, even for the Sellita-based ones, which is kind of where I think the value proposition that used to be for the Diver 65 kind of falls short. But, you know, there's very little to object to about it. It's not exciting at all. I don't think it's necessarily a value proposition, but it's a good looking vintage inspired dive watch from a solid brand. And, you know, that's kind of the long and short on it.
Kevin, 2,450 Swiss francs. How did you vote?
I voted a hit. I mean, it's been a while. It's always needed an update for the past couple of years, and I'm glad they've done that design tweaks on the new variation. They still haven't sorted out the date wheel color match, but never mind. Maybe the next generation they'll get onto that.
One of these
days, exactly. But going back to your question about you know, have they lost their way? I think that they have. I mean, I struggle with them, even though I love the brand. And full disclosure, I do run the Oris Social Club for London, and so I'm a big fan.
Oh, are you about to get chucked out? Well, they're not going to let me in now after I said that.
But the fact that they still have, you know, their in-house movement as well as the space and the Sellita, and you come across certainly on the Aquis range, you got one at £2,500 and one at £4,000. Why would you buy the cheaper one? I know the in-house one's got 10-year warranty and all the rest of it, and it's a better movement, but the person on the street is not going to spend that sort of money. I think they need to make a decision and discontinue the Sellitas and just have it on the Aquis or on the Diver 65s, and so there's a distinctive differential between the brands and the ranges, so the movements stick with them.
But at that point, Oris is going toe to toe with Omega
Yes.
entry level
Yeah.
pieces, and they're more expensive
Tudor.
than Tudor.
Yeah, I know.
At this point, I feel like they can't abandon the Sellita stuff entirely, because it puts them into a price point that's dominated by like big blue chip luxury manufacturers that you see in airports. Tag, So $4,000, that's not an insignificant amount. We're a stone's throw away from an entry level Rolex.
Well, if you can get a Rolex, of course, but that's a separate matter.
They're definitely, I would think, being squashed from both sides. My feeling about this is it's an updated watch that feels like if you were to put the old one and this one side by side, you'd think that this was the older one. It feels like it's, I don't know. It just, yeah, anyway, that's how I feel about it. Ariel, what do you think?
I think that because this watch is so much more expensive than what people originally were excited about with the Oris Diver 65, this is no longer called the 65, it's just a Diver, that it's lost really the reason for why people are excited about it. In all other regards, it's basically like a Toyota Camry of watches. Like, okay, it's perfectly adequate, but nobody buys the Camry for top dollar. They buy it because it's good and cheap. This Oris might be good. It's no longer cheap. It's got, about as much personality as a baseball bat. Okay. Um, it's fine. It's a tool. It's a tool to do the job. But I wouldn't look at it in a window and be like, wow, I can't wait to wear that on a special occasion. It's just, look, if I was in an adventure situation or if I needed a sport watch for diving and I had nothing else and someone's like, here, I'd be like, oh, wow, this is great. This does the job. But in the vast ocean of competition, this watch does not distinguish itself in any way that would put it on like a top 30 list, right? So I don't really understand what Oris is trying to include along with this. We have an interview with Vijay Geronimo from Oris USA soon where he talks about this. I don't think that he actually manages to explain why it's worth that amount of money. I mean, it looks like a perfectly competent watch that everyone says we don't want to spend that much money on. So it's sort of the answer to a question that people are not only not asking, but have said, no, we don't want that from you. They feel that they need to charge that, but as I've said to them, they now have the uphill battle of convincing not only us folks, but pretty much everyone else out there why the hard working brand for hard working people now expects you to spend a lot more than you ever thought you would or could, and that takes you into a lot of other territory. So yeah, sorry for the long response. I don't feel like I understand the value proposition anymore.
Any other brands finding themselves in this squeeze between the micro brands that can move quickly, create unique designs, excite people, and the top end businesses? Is Oris the leading proponent of being in the luxury squeeze at this price point? Are there other brands you think of? I think Formex maybe, or even
Formex, I think, is in a much better position because what Formex does for $1,500 gives you a chronometer certified movement, a much more elaborate case architecture, and this entry price for a Formex is still under $1,000 for something in titanium even. So I think Formex is kind of more in that micro brand space where they can offer strong value for the money. I think Oris might be among the big ones. I think once you get a little bit bigger than them, you get, the luxury, how much is the brand worth? How much is Tag worth? And that's what makes an Aqua Racer worth what it is, not because it's so radically different than other dive watches. But I think Oris, they're big. They're at Watches and Wonders. They have a large booth. You see their ads places, yet they are in, I think, the toughest price point because you have those brands like Tudor who are really, really aggressive in the affordable luxury segment. And then you've got all the Swatch Corp brands like Mito and Tissot barking right at their heels at right around $1,000.
Azad, what do you think?
I gave it a maybe as well. And I do think Oris is really struggling to distinguish between what is its kind of entry level watches versus the higher end watches. Obviously, the Pro Pilots came in a couple of years ago, did reasonably well, not phenomenally, partly because of the way they wear. And as Kevin sort of mentioned, trying to distinguish between the different levels within your brand based on the movement is really difficult. So yes, I mean, I do think there should be more distinction. Maybe they should have saved these divers for the Solitas and left the others, the Aquis, for the higher end movement, and therefore you can clearly say, okay, this is your entry level watch, this is your mid tier, this is your higher end watch. Don't just mix it all up, because at that point you're basically saying to your customers that, frankly, yes, there is a difference between the movements, but they both do the same thing. They both tell you the time, and that's a bit of a problem when you're trying to charge double for pretty much the same part of the exterior of the watch. So yeah, it's a maybe for me. I think they need to really have a think about their lineup and their catalog in general.
Well, and then also, I think Kevin is bringing up a pretty good point. Once everything else is so symmetrical, and obviously there's differences, the remaining difference becomes what you're now charging for the movement. And is the caliber 400 a $2,400 movement? That's a pretty strong ask when you're able to reduce it down that much. When one watch is a tangibly different offering, it's got a more complex case, all of that, some of that can kind of get redistributed. But as Kevin mentioned, you hold up a 400 Aquis and you hold up a Solita Aquis, and across the room they're going to look identical, and that in hand, so much of them is that additional premium largely speaks to the movement. And they're not a brand like Rolex where they're like, well, you're going to pay for our movement. This is still a fairly unproven design, because it's a relatively new design. It hasn't been around long enough to the point where we can say, yeah, those things are problem free for 10 plus years, as they should be per their, the advertising material. It hasn't been around 10 years.
Good stuff. Well, that is our show for this week. We'll have a bit of post-match for those that are on the aBlogtoWatch Weekly Live channel. But for everybody else that's listening to the podcast, do get in touch with the show on the various social media platforms or podcast at aBlogtoWatch.com. We have the WhatsApp number. We have no bagpipes this week, but it's 07386 690 897. Get a +44 in front of that. And if you're watching on video, you'll get to see the number bouncing along the screen at various stages on the edit. So yeah, that's it from us. Have a great week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.